Guys, course back in session. You put that on the record.
Judge, we switched up witnesses. We're going to call Officer
Yeah, that
Linville.
didn't look like someone named Kayla. All rise. All right, please be seated. All right, Stacy, next witness.
Actually, Your Honor, we're going to call Officer Charles Linville, please.
All right. Come on up, Officer Linville.
Raise your right hand and face the mic.
Do you swear to tell the truth, so help you God?
I did.
Would you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
I'm Officer Charles Linville with the Metro Police Department.
And if you could spell your last name for the court reporter.
Linville.
Officer Linville, where are you working within the Metro Police Department?
I work in the crime scene investigation section.
How long have you been with the Metro Police Department?
It'll be 24 years next month,
And how long have you been with this crime scene investigation unit?
almost 18 years.
And is that the unit where Lynn Mace that we just heard from a moment ago, where she works?
Yes, that's correct.
And you, however, are a sworn officer, correct?
Yes,
Do you at certain times respond to crime scenes to document and collect evidence?
yes,
And do you also at times do processing of certain evidence that has been collected from crime scenes and brought to your department?
yes, I do.
Did you respond to the crime scene at 1229 Old Dickerson Pike on August 10th of 2017?
I did not respond to that.
You were not involved with any collection of the evidence from the scene, correct?
That's correct, I was not.
However, you did have some duties regarding processing or documenting evidence that had been collected from the scene, correct?
Yes.
Could you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, well, actually, let's start this way. Hand you these items here. Do you recognize those to be photographs that you took documenting your work on this particular case?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, at this time, we would ask to introduce the photographs taken by Officer Linville as the state's next exhibit. We also have it in digital format. We would make it part of the exhibit.
Photographs are designated what?
Linville photographs would be the easiest way to put that, so we'll know which witness it came through. Can you describe, Officer Linville, first of all, how you received property when you were not the one actually at the crime scene and where you conduct your processing?
Well, on this particular situation, there were two different requests that came in for some items to be processed. When that request is submitted, it goes to the crime lab, and then the crime lab handles getting property brought over from the evidence storage section to the crime lab evidence receiving. Once that evidence arrives at the crime lab, they notify us, and then we're able to go up and check it out from them to bring it down to work.
So you check the items out from the crime laboratory and bring it to the same building?
Yes.
And you have a workspace area at that location?
Yes, it's considered the evidence processing unit.
Okay. And what type of evidence processing did you do in this particular case?
There were two items on the first request, one of which was a granola wrapper and the other was a Cheeto wrapper.
Okay, let me stop you right there. If we could look at the first photograph of the exhibit listed is Linville photographs. Does this show what date and time that you were beginning your processing?
Yes, this is on August the 14th. This is the day that I processed the first request.
Okay, we can go to the next photograph.
This, generally the way that all of the processing starts out is I photograph the packaging of the item as I receive it before I open it. And that's just one of the process. Photography would be the first part.
And is that just to show that there is a seal, there's an integrity to the?
That's correct. And then it also has the identifying numbers and that correlate to the request itself.
Okay. And would this be one side of the bag?
It is.
We show the next photo. Is that the other side?
It is.
And next? Would this be the item that was inside that bag?
This is one of the items. I would have to go back and look at that first picture to make sure that it did in fact say that that was the granola package. But
Okay. Can you describe what we're looking at?
it's just appeared to be a plastic type granola bag that had been opened. It was flattened, and it was just photographed as it came out of the bag.
And what type of processing, if any, did you do on this?
On this particular one, it was processed for fingerprints using single-use powder.
Can you describe what single-use powder is and when and why you use it?
Single-use powder, we use powder to process for fingerprints. The fact of it being considered single-use means that the powder and the brush hadn't been used on any other items, where if there was any reason where a DNA situation could be later, something could be collected because the powder had never been used before and the brush had never been used on any other items.
And that was the process that was used here, correct?
That's correct.
And we can show the next photograph. Did you also process for fingerprints the back section of this bag?
Yes.
Were you able to lift any what we term latent prints from this object?
Latent prints were developed in lifting.
Could you describe what a latent print is and how you collect it?
In this situation, latent is considered that it's kind of an invisible print, where we would use enhancement. The powder is used to where it would then adhere to a print that you wouldn't be able to see to make it visible. The process would then have been, once it's visible, we use fingerprinting tape, which I would describe to you as larger Scotch tape that's, you can see through it, it's frosted, looks very similar. You can place that down over the print and then it will come off the surface. And then it's placed on a white card so that you can see contrast for the print. That card then is labeled with the complaint number that's assigned to the case, information as far as who collected it, the date and time, and what item it was collected off of.
And are you always able to lift a latent print or find a latent print?
No.
What are some of the conditions that can affect whether or not you are successful in lifting a latent print?
Well, there's lots of different reasons. There could be anything from the surface of the item that you're processing. In this case, it's a slick plastic type bag, which I would consider a pretty good surface. You have other items that are porous that just you don't tend to find as much latent print evidence just due to the texture itself. There's items that they could have been rubbed down. They could have just
What do you mean rubbed down?
as far as someone could have wiped it, or it could have been as much as just rubbing against something, sliding something across the surface could damage it. But then you're looking at the fact that it could be the person that actually touched it. They could have had gloves on. A lot of times I try to describe it as like if you considered someone that worked in masonry that does a lot of concrete or brickwork, they could wear their prints down. Their hands could be very dry. Most of the time these latent prints are contaminants from where people have touched stuff, or oils and stuff from skin where they've touched. And if that person has really dry hands, that could, in fact.
So dry skin can even affect whether or not you leave a print.
Absolutely.
What if a person were to utilize gloves? How would that affect your ability to discover latent prints?
I would definitely keep you from being able to find stuff.
Now, just because you are able to lift what appears to be a latent print, and preserve it, does that mean that that print will ultimately be able to be compared or actually matched to someone?
No, it wouldn't.
And what can we, and you actually do not do that comparison, correct?
That's correct.
Your job is to collect it and preserve it. And once you have collected and preserved a latent print, what do you do with it?
Basically, like I said, it goes on the card where the pertinent information regarding that particular lift is from. There may be several lifts, so there could be several cards. All of them would have the identifying information placed on it. They're then placed in an envelope, which then also gets information as far as the complaint number, the location where this took place, date and time. And then all of that stuff is then submitted to the evidence storage section, or in some cases, when we're processing stuff directly in the evidence processing unit, latent prints are an item that we can turn in directly to the evidence receiving of the crime lab for further processing.
And then there would be a trained latent print examiner who would do the ultimate examination. of
That's
that
correct.
print. So the fact that your documentation notes that there is a print does not necessarily reflect whether that print will be of value or usable for,
Correct.
by the comparison.
And when I'm saying it's a latent print, it doesn't always mean that you're visualizing that perfect whole print. The term of a latent print being developed could be that there's just an edge, there's some detail to it that we determine that there's a possibility that one of these latent examiners is going to be able to find something.
And that was done in this particular case on this particular object, correct?
It was.
Okay, we can move to the next photograph. Are we looking at the next exterior bag of another item you processed
Yes, that's the bag for the Cheeto wrapper.
in the next page?
In
Would that
the
be the other side, sealed tape?
Yes.
Next page. Can you describe what we're looking at here?
This is the Cheeto bag as it was removed. It was flat. The only thing that I will say noticeable about this particular item is in the upper right-hand corner and in the lower left-hand corner, there was some staining that I felt looked that it could be consistent or possible blood.
If we can flip through the next couple of photographs, I think we may have closer views of that. Can you point out what you're talking about the red stain?
It would be in this area here.
And then the next photograph?
Well, it's almost in that same circle. Just here on the left side.
Okay. And initially, you were requested to do latent print processing on this particular item as well, correct?
Correct.
Did you, based upon seeing these red stains, which could be blood, did you decide to take an additional step for processing?
I did. I processed with single-use powder, just like I did the other bag. And then on this, the two stains that I identified were also swabbed and collected for DNA purposes.
And that was turned in?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Were you able to recover any latent print, potential latent prints from this particular item?
Latent prints were also developed and lifted off this as well.
And the same process followed, preparing it and preserving it so it could be examined at a later time by a
Correct.
latent print examiner?
Correct.
Next photograph. And is that just another view with the scale of that
Yes, it is.
stain? Next photograph.
This is the back side of the same bag.
And is that standard for you whenever you're looking at any type of evidence to always document the front and back, or if it's a cue, all four sides?
I try to show all the pertinent parts.
Thank you. Next page. And what are we looking at here?
This is a photograph of a bag that contained a window that was collected from the scene, and I believe that I processed it on August the 17th.
Your Honor, if the, I'm not sure which exhibit number that was, but 33, if that could be handed to Officer Linville. Do you recognize that to be the actual object that was in that photograph we were looking at?
Yes, I do.
And can you just describe what you did with that particular, well, if we could return that back, and can you describe what processing you did on the window?
On this, it would have been the same as the other items that we just looked at. The bag was photographed, the window was photographed as I took it out of the bag.
Next.
After photographing, it was also processed with single-use powder, and there was also DNA swabs taken from the item.
And was this the condition that the window was in when you received it?
It is.
And if we could, I think there's a closer view of the next one, Can you kind of explain what this mechanism is on this portion of the window?
Generally,
I never
it's
heard
kind of
that.
turned sideways, but the black portion that says Phillips, at the bottom, there's a little area that sticks out, protrudes from the edge of the window. And from my experience, it would be where you would be able to slide those in to then move the window up or down in the frame.
And that would be on the inside of the window, would be where those little push buttons would be, slide buttons.
I would say yes on the inside.
And going to the next photograph. Can you describe what you were able to recover, if anything, from this particular window?
As far as fingerprinting this item, there were no latent prints developed. And then areas were swabbed. The latch areas of the frame, there were swabs taken. There were swabs taken from the frame itself. And then there were swabs taken on the glass, some smudged areas on the interior side.
Can you explain what you mean by smudged areas?
Areas where I would say that something was touched there, there was no identifiable information like that I would say for latent prints, ridge detail, or any of that type of information. It was just an area that appeared to be touched by something, so that's the reason that that area was swabbed.
And can you give us an idea of, was this just one smudge or multiple smudges, or anything that might tell us potential sizes, whether or not it would be consistent with the size of fingers?
I don't know that I could answer that exactly.
Now, have you, when processing scenes in the past, have you had opportunities to observe smudges on items that you've processed for latent prints?
Yes.
While it cannot be definitively shown, can that be consistent with gloves?
Could be, yes.
If I could show you these items. I will first show you these two items that are marked submission 34 and submission 35. Ask you if you recognize what those are.
One of them is control swabs that were taken on the 14th, 14, 17.
Okay, and the other?
And the other are 4 DNA evidence swabs that were taken also on the 14th from the Cheeto wrapper, from the stain in the upper right and the one in the lower left.
And the control swabs, is that something that you just have been trained routinely to do as a step in your process of collecting DNA evidence?
At that time it was.
Have things changed at this point?
Yes, we no longer do control swabs.
And why is that?
From speaking with our DNA unit, the equipment over time has gotten to the point that it's so much better than it used to be that they're able to detect stuff in a way that the control swabs are not necessary.
Your Honor, at this time we would ask that the control swabs and the other swabs be introduced as the next exhibit.
All right.
If I could hand you this other package, which is, one has a submission number 50 and a submission number 51. On the outside said 6 DNA swabs for the record. Do you recognize the packaging and what's contained within those packages?
I do.
And could you explain for the jury?
The first envelope is 2 more control swabs. and the other is 6 DNA evidence swabs, and this would be the swabs that were taken from the latches on the frame, and then the glass with smudges.
Your Honor, at this time, we would ask that be introduced as the state's next collective exhibit. And the processing of the Cheetos wrapper, the granola bag, and the window, was that the extent of your involvement in this investigation?
Yes, as far as processing.
One moment, Your Honor. No further questions?
Ross? Yes, Your Honor.
Officer Linville, you did a report based on what you did in this case, right?
I did.
And anywhere you report, does it speculate that that smudge on the glass was made with someone using gloves?
No, it wasn't.
And that is because you have absolutely no evidence that that was the case.
I do not know whether it was gloves or not, no.
And that would be pure speculation, and you don't put speculation in police reports, do you?
I do not.
You rely on the evidence that you collect.
That's correct.
That's all.
Do you right?
None, Your Honor.
Thank you, officer. You're excused.
Next call, Officer Fleak, Your Honor.
All right.
Do you swear to tell the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Would you please state your name and spell your last name for the court reporter?
Yes, ma'am. It is Warren Fleak, F-L-E-A-K,
And Officer Fleak, where are you employed?
with the Metro Nashville Police Department
How long have you been so employed?
for 21 years.
Where are you presently assigned?
I've been assigned to the crime scene investigation units for the last 18 years.
And prior to that, what was your assignment?
Just a general patrol officer.
What are your duties within the crime scene investigation unit?
We are requested to a scene whenever patrol requests us to a scene, whatever that scene may be. We will respond to that scene and we'll document the actual scene, locate evidence at the scene, collect that evidence, and preserve that evidence for future testing.
And when there is a major crime scene, do you and your coworkers work together as a team to process and collect and document such evidence?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Did you work in that manner with Lynette Mace?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Did you respond to the scene of 1229 Old Dickerson Pike on the afternoon or the evening of August 10th, 2017?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Do you remember approximately what time you arrived?
I arrived at 22:30 or 10:30 p.m. hours.
And when you arrived, do you know whether or not other police officers were already on the scene?
Yes, ma'am, there were.
And had the crime scene already been secured?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you arrive before Miss Mace, after Miss Mace, or at the same time?
She was there long before I was.
Long before
Yes,
you
ma'am.
were? What shift do you work?
I work the midnight shift. I start my shift at 10:30 at night.
And what time does she start her shift?
Her shift starts at 2:30 in the afternoon.
So you were just coming on to work and responded pretty much immediately to the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
When you arrived on the scene, what type of duties did you take on?
We waited for our supervisor, the midnight shift supervisor, and then we did a walkthrough of the crime scene. A walkthrough is just to, everyone walks through just to see what kind of scene we have and explains what kind of further processing, what else needs done on the crime scene. And once we did that, then I was assigned to assist Lynn Mace with completing the diagram.
Okay. And how did you assist her with completing the diagram?
I collected the measurements while she was actually doing the diagram itself, and I assisted her in collecting the measurements for the diagram.
And did you also have an opportunity to assist with processing a specific window frame from the master bedroom bathroom?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
If I could have this item handed to you. Do you recognize what that item is?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And if I could have that back just for a moment. We'll put this on the screen. For the record, Your Honor, the object that he's been handed has been previously introduced as Exhibit 13.
All right.
Trial. Now, zooming in here, would this actually be your writing on this bag?
Yes, ma'am, it is, complete with my initials right here.
Where are your initials again? Right here?
Yes, ma'am, this area right there.
And this shows that this item was actually collected at what time?
At 05:12 or 05:12 a.m. hours.
And this would have been on the early morning of August the 11th?
Yes, ma'am, the following day.
This would be the complaint number associated with this case?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And the location from which it was recovered?
Yes, ma'am.
And what does this number 2 signify?
2 DNA swabs that were collected from the inside window frame of the master bedroom.
And then the next line?
It would be 2 DNA swabs collected from the said window, the exact same window, except it was the exterior frame.
Now, are these swabs that are contained within this bag, are they just in there, all 4 of them intermingled, or are they wrapped in an individual?
Correct, they are individually wrapped.
And once you collect this item, if it is submitted for processing, is there a submission number and a lab number that would be associated?
Yes, ma'am, and that is all controlled through the property room and the lab itself. That would be one number right there, and submission number, and this number right here is the number that would be assigned specifically to this particular bag.
So for the Metro Crime Laboratory, this would be item number 13.
Yes, ma'am.
And looking on here, would this show that this was part of the chain of custody, that this was submitted by you and received by Law&Crime?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
The evidence in receiving Crime Laboratory?
That's correct.
If I can have you hand it this item here, ask if you recognize that item.
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And do you see your writing on that particular item?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And what is that?
This is a iPad that was collected from the residence on the 11th of August, 2017.
And were you the person that collected it and submitted it?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, we would ask that the iPad collected by Officer Fleak be introduced as the next exhibit.
All right.
And for the record, that would be, I believe,
46.
46. Again, showing you this chain of custody, is this document where you actually submitted this item to Ms. Law&Crime?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Crime Laboratory?
Correct.
Hand you this next item. Do you recognize that packaging and your writing on it?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And what does that package contain?
It contains 2 karate belts that I collected on August the 11th, 2017.
And at this time, Your Honor, we'd ask that these karate belts be introduced as the next exhibit.
All right.
And showing you exhibit number 47. This shows that this item was collected at what time?
At 03:55 hours.
And would that be your initials?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And this shows how many karate belts?
2 karate belts.
And on here, do we likewise have the lab submission number?
Yes, ma'am.
The submission number 5. And do we have here that you were the individual that submitted this item to Ms. Luann Corcoran?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Handing you another item. You could just tell us if you recognize your writing on that particular package, and if so, what it contains.
Yes, ma'am, this is a tissue that I collected on August the 11th, 2017.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd ask that be introduced as the next numbered exhibit.
All right.
For the record, I believe that would be 48. You're being handed another bag. Do you recognize your writing and what is contained within that package?
Yes, ma'am, this is a pair of latex gloves that I collected on August the 11th, 2017.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd ask that the latex gloves be introduced as the state's next numbered exhibit.
All right.
Ask if you recognize your writing on that bag, and if so, what it contains.
Yes, ma'am, this is a Cheetos wrapper that was collected on August the 11th, 2017.
At this time, Your Honor, we'd ask that be moved into evidence as the next exhibit.
Okay.
Being handed another brown paper bag. Ask you if you recognize what that contains.
Yes, ma'am, this contains a cigarette butt that was collected on the 10th of August, 2017, when I first arrived at the scene.
And does it show what time you collected it?
Yes, ma'am, it was 22:53 or 10:53 p.m. hours.
And does it reflect anything about the location from where it was recovered?
At 1225 Old Dickerson Pike.
Okay. And then if I can hand you another, or that could be introduced as the next exhibit.
Okay.
Hand you another exhibit. One thing I would like to ask you, you've mentioned that it says 1225, and I think some of your bags actually have 1225 written on it. If the address, well, were those items collected from the trailer at Lot C2, where the body of Johanna Ortega was?
Yes.
Okay. If other evidence would show that that address is 1229 Old Dickerson Pike, could you just have written a 5 instead of a 9 on some of your paperwork?
Yes, ma'am. We generally keep the same address to avoid confusion as to where the evidence came from.
Okay. So if that had happened, your memory is you collected these items from the actual trailer home or surrounding areas
Correct.
of where Johanna Ortega was
Correct.
found. Okay. Please continue with what that object is.
This is a cigarette, a complete cigarette that I collected on August the 10th, 2017.
Your Honor, at this time we would ask that the complete cigarette be introduced as the next exhibit.
Okay.
You're being handed another brown paper bag. Do you recognize your writing, and if so, what is contained within the bag?
Yes, ma'am. This contains a paper towel that I collected on August the 11th, 2017.
We'd ask that be moved into evidence, Your Honor. And that, I believe, would be number
53.
53. Thank you, Your Honor. Do you recognize your writing, what is contained within that bag?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
It is a granola bag, a wrapper from a granola candy or snack bar that I collected on August the 11th, 2017.
And would that have been collected from the bed adjacent to where the victim, Johanna Ortega, was located?
Yes, ma'am.
We'd ask that be moved into evidence, Your Honor.
Okay.
being handed another bag. Ask you if you recognize what's contained within that bag.
Yes, ma'am. This is a diary that I collected from the bedroom of the residence on August the 11th, 2017.
Your Honor, at this time we'd ask that the diary be introduced as an exhibit.
All right.
Being handed another bag, if I ask you if you recognize your writing, and if so, what is contained within the bag?
This is contains a purse that I collected from the bed of the residence on August the 11th, 2017.
We'd ask that be moved into evidence, Your Honor. You've been handed another bag. Could you tell us what that bag contains?
Yes, ma'am. This also contains a karate belt that was collected on August the 11th, 2017.
We'd ask that, and does it show the location within
Yes,
the home?
this one was collected from the living room area.
But may we move that into evidence, Your Honor? And do one more bag. Do you recognize your writing, and if so, what is contained within that bag?
Yes, ma'am. This contains a curtain that was collected from the master bedroom window on August the 11th, 2017.
Does it show what time it was collected?
It was collected at 05:24 or 05:24 a.m. hours.
And if you would, Your Honor, we'd ask to make that an exhibit, and if the officer could open the bag for us and pull the curtain out to show the condition of the evidence. Your Honor, could it be allowed to step down a little bit?
Sure.
To be able to show the jury? Thank you. Officer Fleak, in addition to the items that we've presented here in court, did you also collect and submit into evidence a shoestring that was located at the exterior of the front door?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Did you also collect and submit a toilet paper package from the hallway leading to the bedroom of Johanna Ortega?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Did you also collect and submit a pillow and pillowcase collected from Johanna Ortega's bed?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Did you likewise collect and submit a mattress top from the bed of Johanna Ortega?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And, let's see, and then some miscellaneous control swabs as part of your processing of the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
Those collected and turned in as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you involved in any of the attempted processing of the exterior of the trailer, particularly in the area underneath the master bathroom window?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you explain what you did and what you attempted to do in that manner?
Yes, ma'am. In this particular area, since the window had been removed from that area, we were curious to see if there would be any fingerprints in that area. So we had processed around that area, which was actually fairly high up. We had to use a ladder to get to that area. We processed with just regular fingerprint powder to attempt to locate any fingerprints.
Using a ladder, were you able to actually reach the area of the window where the window would have been lifted?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, Ross. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, Your Honor, if we could make the curtain an exhibit, I believe I failed to make that an exhibit.
Okay.
I would have no knowledge of that if they had.
Was there crime scene tape up?
Yes, sir.
So other officers had already blocked that area off?
Yes, sir.
And other evidence technicians?
Correct.
Now, you mentioned that you had to use a ladder yourself to get up to process that window.
Yes, sir.
Is that something you carry with you in your patrol car?
Yes, sir, it is.
All right. And before you did that, though, did you look around on the ground to look for shoe prints or other indentations on the ground?
Yes, sir, we did.
Was there any sign of anything found on the ground of evidentiary value outside that window?
No, sir, that was mostly grass.
You didn't notice any holes in the ground which would have indicated someone else had stuck a ladder there and had climbed up? to the
Correct.
window?
Correct.
And if you had, you would have noted that in your report.
Yes, sir.
And your report does reference that, I think all of your reports reference 1225, but we are talking about 1229, correct?
Correct.
The state asked you about a cigarette butt that you recovered. Your report indicates you found that at lot C4. Is that accurate?
That's where I was requested to go to.
Okay, so that wasn't a cigarette butt that was found outside of the trailer of C2 when Ms. Ortega's body was found?
No, sir, it was in the roadway area.
Here, lot C4?
Yes, sir.
Do you know who lived in lot C4?
I have no knowledge.
Was there a chair outside of that master bathroom window that you were asked to process?
Without seeing a photograph, I don't recall one, but I'm not saying there wasn't.
Your report doesn't reflect that you processed, did exhibit processing, is that right?
Of the window?
Of any chair outside that window?
No, I didn't. I don't recall processing a chair.
And you didn't collect that chair according to the evidence documentation form that you prepared in this case?
Correct.
Do you recall where on that window you did the DNA swabs on the outside of the master bathroom window?
It was the entire frame itself.
Oh, you did the entire frame
Correct.
with one swab?
2 swabs.
Okay. It wasn't the glass then that you processed?
No, sir, it was the actual aluminum frame around the window.
Okay. And that's where, so the swabs that we introduced today, that's where that came from?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
What about the interior window? You did 2 swabs there as well?
Yes, sir.
Was that the same thing? You took 2 swabs and went around the entirety of the frame?
Correct.
And you also, did you process the flat part of the glass for fingerprints?
No, that was submitted to the lab. That was collected and submitted to the lab.
When you say submitted to the lab, the exterior window, though, that you tested was not submitted to the lab, is that correct?
That's correct.
It was left there on the scene?
Yes, sir.
And I believe you testified it was approximately, well, I don't know if you did, was it approximately 6 feet from the ground to the bottom of that bathroom window?
Without seeing the photograph, I would say it would probably be fairly accurate.
If Ms. Mace so testified, you wouldn't dispute that?
Correct.
And this exterior window that we're talking about, that's not a clear glass?
No, it was kind of a frosted glass, yes.
And probably because it goes into a bathroom, that's privacy glass, they call it?
Correct, correct.
All right. So that would have been a thicker, or not necessarily thicker, but a more opaque piece of glass than the clear glass that you collected?
Correct.
The latex gloves that you collected, did you later find out that those had been left by another police officer?
I was not aware of that, no.
Is that standard practice for police officers to use gloves and then discard them on the scene without telling someone?
Well, they had been there a significant time prior to me being there. That's possible that the Mace knew about it, but I was never made aware of it.
You were never made aware of it?
Correct.
You just went ahead and collected it because you don't know what's important and what's not.
Exactly.
And your job is to try to collect as much evidence as you can in hopes that evidence can be recovered either then or at a later time.
Yes, sir.
That's all. Read it right.
Briefly, Your Honor. The ground, do you have any memory as to whether or not the ground underneath where you put your ladder, what was grass, rock, gravel, mud, hard dirt?
It was very hard grass because it was August and it's kind of dry. It was very hot that day, so it was very dry.
So when you say that you did not see any indications of a ladder, was that surface such that you could say that there was not a ladder there?
No, it would be so hard you couldn't, there'd be no indication if there had been or not.
And on the inside swabs of the frame. Can you describe a little more detail what you mean by the frame? What
Yes, ma'am. It would be similar to this area right here. It would just be a small, thin piece of aluminum, rectangle shape that goes around the actual window itself. It was approximately maybe an inch wide, just the complete diameter of the window itself.
And actually, after having done your potential DNA swab, was that area processed also for fingerprints as well?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
And the bathroom in between where Oscar Ortega, the little boy, stayed, and Johanna and Jocelyn Ortega stayed, that interior bathroom, was that also processed for fingerprints?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you kind of explain how a scene looks after it has been processed by fingerprints?
It is a very, very dirty, dark charcoal gray. Everything that we put fingerprint powder on is very dark charcoal gray.
No further questions, Your Honor.
So Officer Fleak, after you used your ladder to get up to that window, did you remove the ladder and look to see if it had made indentations in the ground?
I didn't look specifically for that, but no. But I do have to collapse the ladder. It's an extendable ladder, and I would have been looking at the ground. But there was nothing noted.
Nothing noted?
Correct.
As you said here today, though, 2 years later, do you recall exactly what that ground looked like?
I remember it was very hard and very dry.
Okay. So there could have been tracks in it if it was dry?
It's possible.
But no one photographed the area immediately outside that window?
No, sir, it was no dissimilar than the grass around the other trailers.
Whose call would it have been to make those photographs that night? Yours or the lead detectives?
It would have been the lead investigator from that scene, which would have been CST Mace.
That's all.
Anything further?
Did you see anything of photographical importance on the ground that night,
There was-
underneath that window?
There was nothing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next witness.
Chris Bowden.
Judge, actually, we can go ahead and fit in Miss Jessica Davis. We'll do that.
Okay, so Jessica Davis.
Yes, Your Honor. Would you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Yes, I'm Jessica Davis,
Where are you employed?
the Metro Nashville Police Department, the Latent unit.
How long have you been in that position?
About 7 years now.
And what is your official title?
I'm a forensic scientist too.
And what particular area of forensic science are you involved in?
Latent print unit.
Can you explain a little bit about your educational background and professional training?
Yes, I started off in the 10 print unit where I spent 6 months devoted to friction ridges and their characteristics. I then spent 2 years in the latent print training program. I have also have been to outside classes, anywhere from Latent Prints 101 to comprehensive latent print comparisons.
Could you first of all explain what a latent print is and what you meant by friction and ridge detail?
Yes, latent prints are those prints that are found at crime scenes. They are left unintentionally and are usually only fragments of a print. They have to be developed. And friction ridges are just part of the skin in your fingers, your joints, your palm prints, and even the bottom of your feet.
How do you receive evidence for review?
It goes through our evidence receiving unit, and then it comes to our unit.
Have you previously been recognized as an expert in the field of latent print comparison and examination?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, at this time, we would tender Ms. Davis as an expert in that field.
Tompkins.
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, so qualified as a latent print examiner.
Now, when you receive a latent print, could you describe how you begin your analysis?
Yes, I start my analysis by looking at the impression through a magnifying glass. I can also pull it up on the computer to where I can see that print better. In Photoshop, I show with red, green, yellow dots what I see, those different characteristics that I see in that impression.
What are you looking for, and how are you able to compare and match a print to another print?
I'm looking for those ridge characteristics. Ridges flow continuously, and some of them will flow and maybe fork out like a fork. We call that a bifurcation. Some may look like a dot. Some are like short ridges where you have an ending ridge. It's a short ridge, so it flows and it ends on both sides. So those are the kind of things that we're looking for in impression.
How do you receive a print for comparison?
A lot of times a suspect is giving to us, so we have a database where we can go in and print those knowns and to compare those knowns. And then there's some times where we enter prints in our automated fingerprint identification system, and that system generates us a candidate list that might be close matches.
Is there a difference in the quality of print that is needed to put it in the automated system?
Yes, the print has to be of value. Some prints can be of value, but not APHIS quality, or there can be no value prints.
In other words, a print has to have enough uniqueness to it that you're able to have the computer do a comparison for the database.
Yes.
But on a one-on-one, if you were to take a print that's been, I guess, rolled from a person's fingerprints, say such as a victim in a homicide from the medical examiners, if their prints are rolled by the medical examiner onto a card, are you then provided with that as a comparison sample?
Yes.
And taking that inked print from the victim's fingerprint, is that what you're comparing to the unknown latent print?
Yes.
And even if there's not enough ridge detail for an APHIS system hit, you can look and see whether or not there's enough to make an identification.
Yes.
And if what are elimination prints?
Sometimes we're given elimination prints to maybe if someone has said that they were at the crime scene at the time, we can verify that maybe their prints, it wasn't their prints that was left.
So other family members, other people whose prints might be expected to be in a location?
Yes.
And would that include the rolled fingerprints from a particular suspect? Could that be obtained and then submitted to you?
Yes.
Were you asked to examine certain latent fingerprints recovered in the case 2017-0708-296?
Yes.
And did you have an assigned lab number of CL17006991?
Yes.
And did you, in fact, examine certain latent prints and assign them numbers for your purposes of your report?
Yes.
Do you have a copy of your report before you?
I do.
If I could hand you, I'll start off with, at the top left of your report under subject, is that where you list the name of the person whose known print or rolled print you're comparing to the unknown print?
Yes.
And do you recognize that to be your official latent examination report concerning your results from examining the known print or rolled print of Roy Coons to the unknown latent prints?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, we would ask to make that report the state's next exhibit and published for the jury.
All right.
starting here, can you tell us, first of all, what your evidence number 3 was?
003, which is the envelope that was submitted, was latent sealed submission dated 8/11/17 from 1229 Old Dickerson Pike, C2.
And then the contents within that envelope, were they designated as 3-01?
Yes, it was the latent lift card marked from the interior deadbolt latch.
And are your results on the opposite side?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go ahead and look at what your result was from the latent card marked as from the interior deadbolt latch. What is your result with the conclusion? Oh, sorry. Okay.
For that whole submission, there was no comparable impressions in that submission.
Why would that potentially be a result?
Some impressions that are sent to us could be what we consider no value. They have insufficient ridge detail in order to make a comparison.
Now, looking at the next item, which would be marked on your exhibit of your report as 25, what was contained within that envelope?
It was the latent sealed submission dated 8/11/17. It contained 2 lift cards from the iPad back.
And it shows that those latents being lifted at 400 Myatt Drive. Is that the address for the crime laboratory?
Yes.
And what was the result of your examination of 2501 and 2502?
For 2501, all identifiable impressions were identified to another subject. And then 2502, no impressions of comparable value on that item.
Looking at the next item, which would be 33.
It was latent sealed submission dated 8/14/17, and that also was at 400 Myatt Drive.
And what did you have there?
They are from the Cheetos wrapper and a granola wrapper.
And looking at your results from those latents.
03301, all comparable impressions on this item was excluded from this subject. 3302, no impression of comparable value on that item. 3303, all comparable impressions on this item were excluded from the subject. 3304, no impressions of comparable value on this item. 3305, no impressions of comparable value on the item.
And then looking at the exhibit number 62.
That was latent sealed submission dated 8/28/17, and also from 400 Myatt Drive.
And what was your result there?
No impressions of comparable value in the submission.
So you did not find any fingerprints that could be identified to Roy Coons, correct?
No, I did not.
Now handing you another official latent examination report. Do you recognize that to be an accurate copy of your examination report as it relates to your examination comparison of the known print of Johanna Ortega to the latent print submitted to you for comparison?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd ask that that be introduced as the next exhibit and seek to publish.
All right.
Listed here under the section dealing with victims, does that show who is the person's known print that you are comparing to the evidence?
Yes.
And again, do you use the same exhibit numbers that were used in the previous report relating to Mr. Coons?
Yes.
So as it relates to the latent lift card from the interior deadbolt latch, what was your result?
From
Number 3?
003,
Yes. 03.
it was the submission was of no value.
Okay. Looking at now at submission 25, subset 1 and 2, the iPad.
02501 was all identifiable impressions on that item was identified to this subject. And
So
then,
it was your expert opinion that the latent prints on the iPad were identified to the victim, in this case, Johanna Arteta.
yes.
And then looking at 3301, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, the Cheetos and granola wrappers. What were the results there?
3301 was inconclusive for the item. I was unable to identify or exclude due to insufficient ridge details observed between the latent and known exemplar.
Okay.
3302 were no impressions of comparable value on that item. 3303 was also inconclusive.
Can
3304.
you stop you right there? You have outside there that you would need better palm prints from this subject.
Yes.
But at the time that you were examining this, you were limited to the known prints that were collected by the medical examiner.
Yes.
And next?
Sorry, can you?
I think you left off 3303, so what would be 3304
Okay, it would be no impression of comparable value on that item.
and 3305?
No impression of comparable value.
And then last, that leaves us with the, let's see, for the spray bottle and the lotion.
No impressions of comparable value in that submission.
Were you provided with other known prints for any elimination?
I don't believe I was. No.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, Ross?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Davis, how long do fingerprints last on the surface?
It just depends on some circumstances. It could be the type of surface the prints might be left on, the environmental factors, like if it was outside in weather, or if the surface that the print was laid on, if it's cleaned, it might just be wiped away.
You do your testing, are you able to tell if the surface that's being tested for fingerprints has recently been cleaned?
No, I'm not.
There's no test to run for chemicals or anything like that?
No.
So a number of these items that you tested, you were unable to get any sort of print from, is that correct? Such as the Cheetos wrappers, the granola wrappers, the boxes, the cleaning bottle. You just didn't recover any prints whatsoever?
Yes, some we did. The ones that I just went over just a few minutes ago.
Okay. But I thought some said specifically that there was nothing of identifiable value.
Yes, some of them were not.
Okay. Which basically means that there might have been a print, but there was nothing, I guess, left that you could read it from. Is that
Yes.
fair?
Mm-hmm.
So from that, then, for example, the Cheetos bag and the granola bag, from your first report, items 33, where they were inconclusive, unable to identify or exclude based on friction. Can you assume then that whoever was eating from those bags was wearing gloves?
No, I can't.
Then why weren't you able to get a print from those surfaces?
We were able to get a print from that surface, but because there was insufficient ridge detail, we weren't able to compare it, or I needed more knowns in order to continue that comparison.
All right, well, item 62, there was a spray bottle and something marked as lotion.
And we were not able to get a print off that.
So can you assume that whoever handled those items was always wearing gloves?
It's a possibility, but no, I cannot assume that.
And in fact, you wouldn't assume that,
Correct.
because there's no scientific basis to show that just because there's not a print that someone did in fact touch it and they were wearing gloves.
Correct.
That's all.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You're excused. We still have time for a little bit more testimony, so we need to, if you have some.
Let me check outside, Judge, and I'll pick whoever is out there. Perfect, Judge, you have Ms. Fulton.
All right,
Sure, if I can instruct her on one matter, but
sure.
we call to the stand Kayla Fulton, Your Honor.
You'll raise your right hand, please.
Do you swear to tell the truth, so help you God?
I do. Could you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
My name is Kayla Fulton, Kaylafulton.
Where are you employed?
I'm currently employed with the Metro Nashville Police Department in the Drug ID unit in the crime lab.
How long have you been employed with the Metro Police Department?
It'll be 4 years in December.
And are you a sworn officer or are you a civilian employee?
I'm a civilian employee.
And prior to your present position, where were you assigned?
I was assigned with the crime scene unit as a crime scene investigator.
So you would have been one of the individuals who went out to crime scenes and documented and collected certain evidence.
Yes,
Was that your particular assignment back on August the 10th of 2017?
yes, it was.
And did you have an occasion on a date a little bit after that to respond at the request of the case detective to examine and collect and document certain evidence?
Yes.
Where was that location?
It was at 400 Myatt. It was a vehicle bay that we have at the office.
Okay. And is that a place where evidence can be brought in a secure area and then gone through and collected?
Yes.
And when you went there, was the detective there accompanying you?
Yes, he was.
What type of vehicle was present for you to examine?
It was a Chevy Cavalier.
And do you remember what color it was?
If I refer to my notes.
Yes, please.
It was silver in color.
And what exactly did you do as part of your duties with that vehicle and its contents?
My responsibility would have been to photograph and document the vehicle, the condition that it was in, and its contents.
And did you take numerous photographs of that?
Yes, I did.
And were you involved in the collection of certain evidence from that?
Yes, I was.
And do you document and keep a record of what you collect?
I do.
Do you have that paperwork in front of you of what items were collected from this particular vehicle?
Yes. Just one moment. I have it.
Okay. If you could just begin and just describe what you collected from this silver vehicle.
First, I collected a number of DNA swabs from the vehicle.
What areas of the vehicle did you recover those DNA swabs?
From the inside of the vehicle, the interior front driver door, the interior rear driver door, the interior rear passenger door, and the interior front passenger door.
Okay. Were those collected and then submitted to the appropriate property facility?
Yes.
Okay. What else did you recover?
I recovered 3 feminine pads. They were wrapped. There was a some miscellaneous paperwork. There was one earring stud. There was a pink sports bra found. There was, I think in total, there were 2 GPS units found and collected. There was a pair of shorts. There was a shirt. There was a sock. There was a power bank that you would use to charge your phone. 2 pairs of underwear, women's underwear, and there was a micro SD card.
Okay. Now, obviously, you took numerous photographs, but I would just like to show you a few of those in the interest of time. Do you recognize those particular photos?
I do.
And were you the person who took those photos?
Yes.
And the items that are photographed in there, where did they come from?
They would have been in the trunk of the vehicle.
Your Honor, at this time we would ask that the photographs of items from the trunk of the vehicle be introduced as the next exhibit and asked to publish. For purposes of the record, Your Honor, I'm going to, there are 4 of them. I will mark them A, B, C, and D.
All right. Okay, that's number 61.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm showing you photograph 61A. What is that photo of?
It appears to be a black Nike sneaker.
And did you also locate other shoes as well within the vehicle?
Yes, I did.
Showing you what is marked as 61B. Ask if you can describe what this is in relation to the previous photograph.
It's the bottom of the sole of that the sneaker that was just seen.
Now showing you what is photograph 61C.
Appears to be a tool bag with miscellaneous tools.
And does this actually have a top portion to the bag and an underneath section?
Yes, it was a zip top.
Now showing you what is 61D. Would this be underneath the section that we just saw in the same bag?
Yes.
Did you collect or process any other items in this particular case?
If you wouldn't mind if I referred to my notes to make
Yes.
sure. The only other processing that I did was just photograph the items that were collected in more detail at a later date.
And they all related to that vehicle
Yes.
and items within that vehicle?
Yes.
I could hand you one additional photograph. Do you recognize that photograph as being one that you took?
Yes.
And where did that item, and we'll publish where that is in a moment, but where did that item, where was it recovered from? From where?
It was in the vehicle. I can't say for sure where I exactly found it.
Your Honor, actually, is that a photograph of a Tennessee ID card?
Yes, it is.
At this time, Your Honor, we ask the photograph of the Tennessee ID card be the next exhibit and seek to publish.
All right.
And that Tennessee ID has listed on its name, what name?
A Roy Donald Coons. junior.
Thank you. No further questions?
Ross, yeah, I've not received Jeeks according to my records on Ms. Fulton. I'd have to see the report she's using to refresh her recollection with.
All right.
These were the 3 documents that I was referring to. Everything else, if anyone wants to see again.
Ms. Fulton, it appears from the records that one of the items you recovered from inside of this car was an orange striped polo shirt. Is that correct?
Yes,
And you also recovered a white sock that looked like it might have some blood on it.
that's correct.
And those were collected and sent off for testing.
They were collected. I don't know if they were sent for testing.
And you did attempt to recover DNA, or you did swab for DNA, it looks like 5 locations from the vehicle. Is that correct?
There would have been 4 locations. The 5th that you are seeing is the control swab.
And I believe you don't do that anymore. Is that right? Control swab?
I wouldn't know. I'm not in crime scene at this time.
And it appears that you didn't recover any gloves from this vehicle. Is that right?
I don't believe I did. I'd have to refer to those notes.
Okay. I'll give you your notes back. Let's make sure.
Thank you.
Have you had a chance to review your notes?
I did.
Is there any indication that you recovered any gloves from that vehicle?
No, sir, there wasn't.
If there had been, you would have documented that in your report.
Yes, I would have.
That's all.
All right, redirect.
Nothing you can redirect, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, ma'am. You're excused.
Thank you.
All of our remaining witnesses are lengthier witnesses.
Lengthier. You didn't call any of these today lengthy?
Well, they're not DNA at least.
Okay. All right, we're a little early, but we're gonna go ahead and take lunch. My assistant said it won't be ready until 10 after 12, or 11 to be precise, 11 after 12. So, maybe it's ready already, but we'll see. Anyway, we'll take a lunch, break until 1 o'clock.
All right. We'll be in the lunch recess.